A steel door swings open, the night is wet, and silent headlights are already watching outside Cook County Jail. KTS Dre takes what should have been the first 2 breaths of freedom, but in the next few moments the air is about to rip apart with gunfire. The bond had been posted, the release had gone through, and somehow someone seemed to know the exact second he would step through that gate. That is where the real question begins. Was this only an ambush, or did somebody sell the timing? Online, people are saying a final prison call, hidden details, and voices tied to the NLMB side make the story even darker than the headlines ever showed. But when you strip away the noise and line up the facts, the rumors, the jail timeline, the street whispers, and those last known moments, the picture starts looking more dangerous. 1 rapper, 1 release window, dozens of shots, 2 wounded witnesses, and 1 question that still hangs in the air: how are the shooters already waiting? Today we are not looking at this case like a viral headline. We are breaking it down second by second. Was KTS Dre walking into the most dangerous exit of his life? Had an old war already reached the jail gate? And is the story moving across social media really the full story at all, or just another layer of darkness covering something even worse? Every detail does not close the mystery. It makes it deeper. First, understand the scene itself. This was not some ordinary release where a man signs paperwork, steps outside, gets into a car, and heads home. According to reports, Londre Sylvester, known publicly as KTS Dre, was released from Cook County Jail. But within minutes of that release, he was caught in an attack so brutal that it turned the entire incident into more than just another killing in Chicago drill history. Official reporting says his fiancée had posted a $5,000 deposit bond. That means the exit was planned, not sudden. He came out of jail, moved into the South California Avenue area, and then the shooting started. This is the point where the suspense does not slowly build. It detonates. The speed of the attack is exactly why the question around timing still bothers people years later. Mainstream reports confirm that the shooting happened at around 8:50 p.m. A vehicle pulled up, at least 2 attackers got out, and dozens of rounds were fired. Several reports said Dre was struck in the face and chest, and later multiple outlets carried the widely repeated number that he suffered as many as 64 bullet wounds. 2 other women were also hit. One 60-year-old woman walking with him was shot in the knee, while another woman suffered a graze wound. These details do not feel disturbing just because they make for shocking headlines. They matter because they show a controlled, sudden burst of violence with collateral danger built into it. This was not a warning shot situation. Whoever came there came to finish the attack. From here, another layer starts opening. KTS Dre was not a name that circulated only because of music. His name was tied to street tension, online taunts, old feuds, and that part of drill culture where disrespect does not stay on the internet. It moves into real blocks and real consequences. Commentary videos and long-form gang histories have repeatedly highlighted the years-long hostility involving KTS, Lakeside, and NLMB. The important distinction is that official police reporting did not publicly name a gang as responsible for that night's attack. That means when people point directly on social media, they are mostly building from street narratives, old live videos, diss records, and rival reactions, not from final courtroom proof. But that gap is exactly where suspense grows. When the official story stays short and the street story becomes much longer, viewers naturally rush toward the version that feels like it might contain the answer. So before anything else, Dre's legal situation matters, because without it the importance of the release timing does not fully register. Reports say he was dealing with a 2020 gun case. He had gone back into custody over issues connected to bond conditions and electronic monitoring. Reports from outlets like the Sun-Times and Fox 32 describe allegations that earlier release conditions had been violated. In other words, he was already inside a structured system, and his movement was not as random as ordinary street movement. Court process, bond posting, release windows, monitoring requirements, all of that comes from paperwork and procedure. That is why one of the first reactions people have is simple. If the release was structured, where did the exact timing leak from? And if there was no leak, then how were the shooters standing in the right place at the right moment with such deadly precision? A recent social media case file preview poured even more fuel on that mystery. In that preview, the claim is that the bond had already been posted, the release was delayed, Dre finally walked out, and minutes later the attack happened. It also mentions shell casings, a last image, a medical examiner diagram, and street context involving KTS and NLMB. Right now, those things sit more in the lane of social media framing than fully authenticated documentary evidence, but their role in viral storytelling is huge. Why? Because the moment you tell an audience that the full story has not yet surfaced, every small detail starts looking like part of a hidden file. And in a case already this dark, it does not take much to push rumor into the center of attention. One of the most haunting ideas in the public imagination is the idea of a final image. Online communities have circulated the claim that a last photo of Dre was taken after his release and just before the shooting. Whether every viral version is equally trustworthy or not, the emotional impact of that image is powerful. A man who is technically free, only to be pushed toward death within moments, becomes more than a victim in a report. He becomes a frozen frame. That is why the KTS Dre case did not remain just another murder story. It became an exit door horror scene. Then comes the sentence repeated across videos, reels, threads, and comment sections. This is not the full story. That line works because this case genuinely seems to operate on two parallel tracks. The first is the official track. Dre was released, walked outside, shooters opened fire, he died, 2 other people were injured, and the motive was not publicly nailed down. The second is the unofficial track. Old enemies were already watching, the release time was passed along, online taunts raised the pressure, and some final call or jail-related conversation exposed tension that the public still does not fully understand. The two tracks touch each other, but they are not the same thing. And if a script is really going to feel hot, it cannot blur them into one. It has to show the dangerous gap between them. That is where KTS Dre stops feeling like only an individual and starts becoming a symbol. Some people see him as fearless. Some see him as reckless. Some see him as a victim. Others see him as an aggressor. And some see him as a man who had reached that stage of drill warfare where survival and visibility begin standing against each other. When he went live, when he argued with rivals online, when old street blood merged with modern internet culture, maybe that felt like content to the audience. But what happened outside the jail gate turned content into consequence. That is the moment when the narration should slow down, the voiceover should drop lower, and the line should land hard. The gate to freedom opened, but the road outside was not leading home. It was leading into gunfire. Every documented point becomes more important because of that. The bond being posted. The delay in release. The moment he stepped out. The injuries to the witnesses. The official statement staying short. When details remain limited, speculation starts dressing itself like evidence. That happened in Dre's case too. The clearer a few parts of the record became, the thicker the fog around everything else started to feel. And once that fog settles in, every event starts looking secret, and every coincidence starts looking scripted. That is why the case keeps breathing online. Every confirmed detail feels cold and official, while every missing minute feels alive, personal, predatory, and impossible to ignore completely. Now move into the feud that always hangs over this story like a shadow. To understand KTS Dre, you cannot look only at that one night. You have to look at the years before it, when Chicago drill tension stopped being only about music. Documentary-style videos, archived live streams, and commentary channels all pushed the impression that the friction between KTS, Lakeside, and NLMB was public, personal, and long-running. Rival names were spoken on lives. Dead members were referenced. Taunts were exchanged. Every new clip seemed to throw more air onto an old fire. That is why, when Dre was ambushed, the internet did not treat it like some random crime. People immediately placed it inside a larger war. But this is where an important line has to be drawn. Internet reaction and confirmed law enforcement statements are not the same thing. The short WGN news package only said that 2 men got out of a vehicle and opened fire. It did not confirm a motive, identify named suspects, or officially attach the shooting to a gang. Yet unofficially, the room was already full. Comment sections, reaction videos, and street pages rushed to fill the empty spaces with their own names and theories. That is why any script on this case becomes either stronger or weaker depending on whether it respects that difference. Ignore it, and the script becomes careless. Show it clearly, and the story gets even more tense. Now think about the psychological effect of this recent final prison call, and that is not the full story framing that keeps circulating online. The moment people hear that some audio, hidden context, or side voices have surfaced, they instantly assume the real secret is finally about to break open. But based on what is publicly accessible, there is still no clearly authenticated prison call audio sitting in the record as the final answer. What we mostly have are recent preview-style posts that repackage the case, the release window, shell casings, the last photo, street context, the unanswered timing question. What does that mean? It means the narrative is being reignited, and the phrase full story is being used like a suspense engine. And honestly, that strategy works because this case already contains everything needed to make conspiracy-flavored true crime go viral. First, there is exact timing. Second, there is a jail release, a controlled environment. Third, there is a public history with old rivals. Fourth, there is extreme violence. Fifth, there is official silence on motive. Sixth, there are online clips that give half a point and leave the other half hanging like bait. When all of that combines, every new reel, screenshot, and supposed detail makes viewers feel as if they are standing close to the final locked door, when in reality they may have only stepped into another hallway. It also helps to focus on KTS Dre's public image. Commentary videos often paint him as someone who did not back down online. Rival lives, hard talk, disenergy, all of that became part of his image. Some narratives treat him like the face of direct conflict. That is why, when he died, people did not only see the death of one man, they saw the fall of a symbol. And when a symbol falls, every side writes its own version of the story. Supporters frame him as a target. Detractors frame him as a consequence. Neutral viewers frame him as the peak of modern drill tragedy. Same event, three different lenses. The job of the script is to show those lenses without getting trapped inside one of them. Another important point is how often Dre's ambush has been repeated in street lore. The more it gets repeated, the more factual sequence and mythic retelling start blending together. Numbers like 64 shots or 59 shell casings stop functioning only as forensic details and start functioning like symbols. Each time those numbers are repeated, the story becomes more cinematic. But behind the numbers sits the real horror. A man crossed the threshold of a custody system and, within moments, the outside world turned into a kill zone. A place that should have been a point of transition became a point of execution panic. That image is exactly what keeps dragging storytellers back. So why does the NLMB side that is not the full story angle stick so hard? Because when a rival side gives a reaction, a denial, a dismissal, or some alternate framing, the public instantly starts reading it as hidden knowledge. Social media culture often mistakes the loudest response for the deepest truth. If someone says you only heard half of it, the audience immediately starts writing the missing half in their own heads. That is exactly what happens here. People assume that old live sessions, jail-related conversations, and behind-the-scenes timing details must exist somewhere within a rival ecosystem. The problem is that internet culture marries assumption to evidence far too quickly. Even so, the suspense cannot just be dismissed, because some parts are objectively chilling. Reports themselves said it was not clear why Dre was released at that exact time, or how the attackers knew he would be coming out then. That is not a fan theory. That is a documented mystery. It does not automatically prove an inside leak, but it absolutely proves that timing is central. And when timing becomes the central question, every phone call, every jail reference, every bond detail, every delay, and every last sighting starts looking like evidence even when some of it may only be surrounding noise. This is where the tempo of the script should tighten again. Imagine the inside process. Paperwork moving. Staff doing routine tasks. Traffic moving outside. Maybe nobody knows. Maybe somebody knows far too well what gate is about to open and why. Dre steps out. Maybe he is thinking about finally going home. Maybe about ankle monitor procedure. Maybe just relief. Then relief gets cut apart by gunfire. That is why people do not ask only who killed him. They ask who waited, who watched, who told, and who later rewrote the story in public. If we strip away the noise, the core result of Part 2 is this. To understand KTS Dre's death, you have to understand two worlds. The first is the documented world, where reports, charges, bond, release, casualties, and open questions exist. The second is the performative world, where lives, rival talk, dis-energy, reaction pages, teaser posts, and promises of the full story keep circulating. When those two worlds overlap, the case stops behaving like only a murder case. It becomes a media event. And the most dangerous part of a media event is that people often believe the version that feels most dramatic, not the version that is most proven. And once that media machine starts spinning, silence becomes suspicious, denial becomes content, old clips become evidence in the public mind, and every half-answer creates room for another theory. That is why this case never stays still. It keeps mutating between reporting, memory, performance, and myth every single time somebody posts it again for attention and argument. Now we reach the final layer. Was this case simply the explosion of an old feud, or was it a planned interception where the release itself had become the target? We are not going to turn speculation into fact, but we are not going to hide the questions either, because the questions are the heart of the story. If the bond had already been posted, if the release followed a structured process, and if the attack came almost immediately, then either the attackers were operating with extraordinary observation, or the timing reached them through some chain, or the coincidence was so perfect that it practically refused to call itself coincidence. That tension is what lifted the KTS Dre case out of the category of an ordinary street homicide and pushed it toward urban myth. Recent social media previews keep milking exactly that point. They tell people to look at the shell casing count, the last image, the medical diagram, the blurred crime scene visuals, the street context, and then ask who knew he was coming out. It is smart framing because it does not directly accuse anybody. It just pushes the audience to the place where accusation begins forming inside their own mind. In suspense storytelling, that is called controlled ignition. You do not light the match on camera. You fill the room with gas and then let one spark do the rest. In this case, that spark is the release timing. Now think from the perspective of the average viewer online. They see the headline, "Final prison call surfaced." Then they see another angle, NLMB says that is not the full story. Immediately, it feels like two camps are opening their own files. On one side, there is the haunting framing of final moments. On the other side, there is dismissal, mockery, or alternate context from a rival lane. The audience splits emotionally right away. Some people think the hidden truth is finally coming out. Others think a dead man's name is being recycled for clout again. Some just watch the drama unfold. But under all three reactions sits the same magnetic center, Dre's exit, the one moment that froze everything. There is also a darker irony buried in KTS Dre's story. Drill culture gives visibility, but visibility is not protection. You build a name, clips go viral, rivals engage publicly, audiences choose sides, and then at some point you stop being seen as only a person. You become a pattern. And once you become a pattern, the audience starts reading you less like a human being and more like an unfolding storyline. Something similar happened with Dre. After his death, every new detail began getting measured less by its value for justice and more by its value for narrative. Which clip carries more heat? Which reaction shows more disrespect? Which rumor sounds darker? It is brutal, but that is how the online ecosystem works. That is why, when people hear the phrase full story, two ideas should land at once. First, yes, some context may still be missing. Second, the full story may never truly arrive, because the internet often prefers unfinished tension to completed answers. Even if a call leaks tomorrow, even if a longer version of an old live appears, even if some insider-sounding post surfaces, the core mysteries may remain exactly where they are. What path did the shooters take? Who waited? How did the release timing become known? And how close or how far has the official case ever moved? Some stories end through evidence. Others stay alive through repetition. If we focus only on the strongest grounded facts, the structure is simple. Dre was released. The attack came almost immediately. He was hit by multiple shots. 2 other people were injured. Public reporting did not firmly establish the motive. Timing remains the central mystery. Everything else floating through the air may include possible context, clout packaging, half-truths, and pure narrative smoke. But smoke still gathers where fire once burned. That is one reason people cannot let go of this case. There is another dimension to the mystery that a lot of people miss. A jail release is not only an administrative event. It is also an information event. Who knew the bond had cleared? Who knew when the paperwork closed? Who knew which side he would exit from? Who knew the pickup pattern outside? Maybe the answers to those questions are completely ordinary. Maybe someone was watching. Maybe someone was following. Maybe observing the release process was enough. But when the outcome is this violent, even an ordinary explanation starts sounding sinister. That is why every witness detail, every reported delay, every vehicle mention, and every online reaction becomes a puzzle piece for the audience. Some pieces may fit. Some may never fit. Some may have been thrown out there to send people in the wrong direction. And maybe that is exactly why the story survives. Certainty is low, but emotional gravity is enormous. Every new clip promises that the file is about to open, that the secret is about to come out, that the missing name is finally about to surface. Yet what usually happens is the opposite. Instead of closing, the story widens, and Dre's final exit gets replayed again on a digital stage. As long as that replay continues, people will keep searching not only for the killer, but for the hidden line between system, timing, silence, and street memory. And until something undeniable appears, the absence of certainty will keep feeding the case, because mystery on the internet spreads faster, lasts longer, and cuts deeper than resolution ever does for years after death. And now the line this entire script should land on: KTS Dre crossed the jail gate, but he did not cross into safety. That night, the distance between freedom and death was only a few steps. The people saying this is not the full story may even be right. Maybe there was more. Maybe there was context without confession. Maybe there was nothing more than the old smoke of rivalry rising again in new reels. But one thing is undeniable. The official seconds we do know are already terrifying enough that rumors do not have to work very hard to stay alive around them. So whenever you see a headline saying a final prison call has surfaced, or hear a rival side saying that is not the full story, do not rush to the conclusion. First, remember that some facts are hard as stone, while some narratives change shape like fog. The real heat in this case comes from that collision. A documented ambush, a disputed backstory, a release window that still feels like an open wound, and a name that remains a digital battleground even after death. If you want more raw, suspense-heavy, fully structured breakdowns like this, where facts and rumors get separated so the real tension can come through, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what you think the biggest mystery is: the timing, the leaked context, or the things the public may still have never been told. The next story gets even darker.